Well, welcome to the Post Sunday app. Thank you for joining us today on this video. Daniel, we had some good, before I get to the sermon, we had some good words yesterday from Kirk Hoffman. At our service.
Kirk. Yeah,
good old Kirk. Yeah. So he talked about your sabbatical. We talked about officers that we'll be voting on here soon in the church, and talked about our building, where that's at. So I wanted to give you a chance if anything you wanted to add to that, because I know when you got up there, it was sermon time.
Right, I didn't know if there'd be time left for the sermon. So you give Kirk 3 announcements to do.
He got through them quick, man. He did a great job.
Well.
Very clear.
No,
anything else you want to add?
Let's see. Maybe just like he said, very grateful for the people who have been willing to serve in those roles, and grateful to the church for the gift of a sabbatical. And I'll be putting some more stuff on the blog about what I hope to do during that time, and kind of keeping the church updated on how God is using that time in my life. And
great.
I'm excited about the people who will be here to fill the pulpit while I'm gone. So excited that I'll be here the first Sunday of my sabbatical. Maybe I should keep that on the download. But
hide up in the balcony.
Yeah,
somewhere.
That's right. No, I want to. It's gonna be hard to be gone.
Sure.
And then, the building. You know, it's a neat time in the life of our church, and we get to see the building every day, and we don't get to go in it every day, but you see the progress that's being made, and it's interesting to me how much of our summer and fall is already being shaped by the possibility of. I've been surprised. I thought, well, it won't affect my ministry that much. It's going to affect some other ministries more, but it seems like every few days I'm telling people, well, you know what, the building will be done on that date, and we can think about how the building can help that ministry. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's neat.
Yeah. So as we plan ahead, we have to keep in mind that we'll have this, Lord willing, this awesome facility to help expand the ministry. So it's an exciting time for sure. But before you head out on sabbatical, we want to get through 3 John with you.
Yes, let's do that.
So 11 and 12, verses 11 and 12, the spiritual discipline of imitation. Now, I have books talking about spiritual disciplines. Imitation, this isn't a chapter title.
Mimicry.
So it was a very great title, because it did draw people in, like, wait, what's he talking about here? Your 3 points: we are imitators, we are tempted to imitate evil, and we must imitate good. So a couple of questions based on the sermon. One is, why such a focus here on imitating people? My goal in life is to become more like Christ.
Right.
Why follow others? Why imitate others?
Well, one, you think of what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 11, be imitators of me as I imitate Christ. And everything we learn is about imitation, really. That's why God's committed discipleship to us. And really, when I talk about imitation a lot yesterday, I was talking about discipleship. And so, even though our ultimate goal is to follow Christ, sometimes it's hard for us to know how to follow Christ in specific circumstances. And so as I think about following Christ in specific circumstances, I look at people who've been successful in living the Christian life, and I say, okay, I know this person has arrived at a place of spiritual maturity, for sure, beyond where I am in some areas. How did they handle whenever their kid was disobedient? How did they handle whenever they had a conflict with a coworker? And then I look at that and I say, now what they did in that circumstance, does that conform with what Scripture tells me to do? Oh, if it does, then as I imitate them, I'm ultimately imitating Christ. Because I may not be able to think of some specific applications of Scripture to a circumstance, and so seeing how my co-laborers and my fellow Christians have done things helps me ultimately be an imitator of Christ.
It's 2 Timothy 2:2, and in some regarding the things you heard from me in the presence of many witnesses. He's entrusted faithful men. I was maybe talking more in a teaching context there, but I think that can be applicable to just seeing how, if I see how Daniel Bennett reacts to this certain situation, then when I'm in that situation, I'm going to hear back to what did Daniel do?
It's part of that encouraging one another, admonishing one another. It's why we live in a community. If it was just about imitating Christ and we didn't need other people to help us understand what that looked like, then we could just live life in isolation. But imitation is part of living life in community.
Very good. Another question then, this idea of, are we to imitate, are we kind of made to imitate because we're an image bearer, or we're created in the image of God? Are there any correlations there?
I'm not sure. I mean, for sure, we have been created in the image of God, and so we do bear His image. And part of how He's made us is to be people who are imitating. But I'm not sure if imitation is an essential attribute of God. I mean, God doesn't imitate us in terms of understanding how to live. Maybe within the Trinity, but even there, it's all self-contained. It's not. I don't think. I have to be careful here. Now I'm delving into theology. Let me make sure I'm saying this precisely. Does God learn anything from Himself? And I don't think we see that emphasized in Scripture either. So I would say that imitation is not part of whenever Genesis talks about us being made in the image of God, I don't think that imitation is part of the idea there, but it's certainly part of how God has created us. It's part of our makeup and ultimately, and maybe this is where the question is getting with now I think about it. Could we be like God if we weren't able to imitate? Maybe that's what the question is getting at.
Okay.
Not is it part of God's attribute that we mirror, but could we become like God in His other qualities and characteristics if we didn't have the ability to imitate? And the answer is probably no. So imitation helps us become more like the one whose image we bear.
Yeah. Well, great.
Glad I had a long time to answer that question so I could go full circle.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to Easter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
And so that'll be this Sunday. We want to invite anybody who's watching this, if they don't have a church home, to join us. And we also have an Easter breakfast that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
People just bring stuff, and we just have a good time.
Good time of fellowship.
Enjoying that. It's at 8 o'clock. And so hopefully you can join us at 5 Points, Washington, if you're watching this in time. Other than that, have a great day.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on the Post Sunday app.